I'm Charles Gross. Welcome to what I hope will someday become the second most famous story about the town of Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Stockbridge is in the Berkshires, probably best known for the Tanglewood Music Festival and the Norman Rockwell Museum. My family used to vacation there every year during the 1960s. I remember one year we drove up there from New York City, my parents, my siblings, and me. We drove up in my father's 1965 Chrysler Newport, which had 8 side windows, 6 of which could be opened. And that was important because it was a black car and it had no air conditioner. It was like a rolling steam bath if the windows were closed. It did have 3 seat belts in the back seat. That was unusual because cars back then didn't come with seat belts in the back seat, not even as an option. But our car had them because when my father bought the car, he told the dealer to take the seat belts out of the front seat of his old car and put them in the back seat of the Newport. That way, whenever my brother, my sister, and I went for a ride in the car, we could always buckle up, whether we wanted to or not. Every year on the way to Stockbridge, we would stop off at this antique store in Connecticut, where years earlier my father had bought my mother a rocking chair. She had used it to rock us all to sleep when we were babies. I loved the place. The front lawn had all these old sewing machines and push mowers. Perfect toys for a 5-year-old. That year we had rented a cottage from the local undertaker in Stockbridge by the name of Mr. Harvey. The cottage was right next to a lagoon, and in the lagoon was a rowboat that Mr. Harvey kept there. We would take the rowboat and row through the lagoon and out to the lake. And when we weren't rowing on the lake, we were swimming in the lake. And when we weren't swimming in the lake, we were running around the front yard of the cottage, just having fun. Our neighbors were the Steins. They had a motorboat, and they invited my parents to come water skiing. I was too young to go water skiing, so they attached a towboard to the boat, and my father and I climbed on it. The motorboat took off. 5 seconds later, my father and I fell off the towboard and into the lake. Splash. Fortunately, we both knew how to swim and we were both wearing life jackets. It was kind of fun now that I think about it, but we never tried it again. We had rented the cottage from Mr. Harvey for a month, but my father had to go back to New York City to go to work after 2 weeks. That meant, except for weekends, my mother was going to be alone in the cottage with 3 small children. And the cottage did not have a telephone. My mother did not want to be left alone in a cottage with 3 small children and no telephone, so we used a neighbor's phone to call the telephone company. The next day, they arrived with a big truck. And on the back of the truck was a telephone pole and this huge drill. They took the drill and they drilled this large hole right across the road from the cottage. And they took the telephone pole and put it in the hole. And they took the pole in the hole and connected it to the cottage so that my mother could have her telephone for 2 whole weeks. Flash forward 40 years, and I'm driving through the Berkshires with my wife and my small children in a 2001 Toyota Avalon. That car had 6 side windows, 4 of which could be open, but seldom were because this car had an air conditioner. And 3 seat belts in the back seat. Standard. As we were driving through Stockbridge, I thought it would be fun to show my wife and children the Harvey cottage that we had stayed in so many years ago. There was only one problem. I had no idea where it was. But I figured Stockbridge is a small town. There's got to be someone there who remembers Mr. Harvey. So I went to the town hall, and sure enough, there were people there who remembered him. They couldn't tell me exactly where the cottage was, but they could point me in the general vicinity. So we drove to the general vicinity. There were a lot of cottages in that general vicinity. I didn't know which way to turn. Then I remembered that the Harvey cottage was next to a lagoon. So I found the lagoon, and there, surrounded by all these newly built McMansions, was the Harvey cottage. Except for a paint job, it hadn't changed a bit. I knocked on the front door. There were people living there. They let us in. They were so nice. They showed us around the place. It was like stepping back 40 years in time. I went out of the cottage and across the road, and there, covered by vines and trees, was the telephone pole. Still in the hole, still connected to the cottage after all these years. So I guess you sometimes can go home again, even if it was only your home for 1 month 40 years ago.